Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and I am with you from lovely Escazú, Costa Rica, on Sunday, October 27th, in the year 2024. And I have lots of juicy things to tell you about the week ahead and at this very moment, what's going on. So let's talk about it. First of all, Venus, the Moon, and Saturn are in a T-square in this moment as we speak. And the Moon is now moving out of the T-square. And what a T-square is it's actually a T. If you drew lines from one planet to the other, you'd get the shape of the letter T. And what happens with that is it becomes a stress relationship between those three planets. And then there's an empty space because it's not a grand cross, it's a T-square. And they are in usually all the same modality, so they're all mutable. So this is Venus, Saturn, and the Moon. The Moon is in Virgo, Saturn is in Pisces, opposite the Moon, and Venus is in Sagittarius. Now Jupiter's in Gemini, but it's not part of the T-square at this moment because it's further on. The stress points were Saturn, Moon, Venus. This is relationships. This is feminine energy. This is the goddesses. This is all about the female, the feminine, the divine feminine, and the experience of the feminine in each of our lives. Now, this could come in the form of yourself, because everybody has the polarities within them. Every human being, every animal, every living thing on earth has the polarities, the masculine, the feminine, and one would hope the divine masculine, the divine feminine. But each and every one of us has some qualities of the feminine, and this is a call to respond to these things today and deal with the Saturnine qualities of this. Maybe not so nice, maybe a little more critical because the Moon is in Virgo, maybe a little more perfection oriented. But you could be dealing with this in someone else in your life. You could be dealing with this with your parents, with your colleagues, with your friends, with your partner, with your kids. The point is, it's a Venus, Saturn, Moon, T-square. And so also what this is about is feeling loved. This is about feeling loved, being loved, knowing you're loved, and owning the love you have for yourself. So self-love is a big one in this because Venus and Saturn, which are going to make the exact square tomorrow, 9:35 a.m. Eastern Time, they are going to be in this dynamic, today, tomorrow, Tuesday. That's how it flows. And we're approaching the square. It's an applying square. And then once the square starts to separate after the aspect becomes exact, wherever you are in the world, it will definitely start to let up. But we're in it right now. And so there is this feeling of, separation. And that's uncomfortable. Saturn often represents separation, represents a door closing, represents responsibility in relationships and responsibility for ourselves in relationships. So there can be those very big dynamics going on right now. But there's some added juiciness here because that configuration of the Moon and Venus and Saturn is getting triggered by Mars, which is at 27 degrees of Cancer. Now, how might I say that? It's because we look a little deeper at these things, okay? And what I learned many, many years ago in my astrology, in my advanced astrology training, is what we start to look at things in the configurations of how they might be triggering each other that isn't obvious. And so Mars is in one of these configurations triggering Saturn and Venus and the Moon right now. This is called a semi-square, or it's a sesquisquare to some of the other planets. These are more unknown and seemingly minor aspects. They are not minor aspects. We still feel them just as much as we feel, Venus talking to Saturn in a stressful way. So these are all challenging things. So Mars is in there, right in there, needling the Moon and Venus and Saturn and putting a big charge on this, throwing a few extra curveballs into this mix, and telling us that we're triggered and we don't know why we're triggered. And if I was looking at this in my astrology, just basically, I might say, oh, yeah, there's a T-square, but it's ending. Mars is triggering this, and it's going to continue to trigger this because Venus and Saturn are going to make this challenge to one another tomorrow. So Mars is the divine masculine component of this, and we are dealing with the polarities. So if your relationships are edgy today, if people are irritating you, no matter who they are, even if it's the shop person, well, maybe you just have to take a step back and say, why is this triggering me? What is making me triggered about this dynamic that I'm in? Because there are triggering dynamics today. And so we want to be aware of these things, and that's why you listen to Deb here on the Golden Astrologer Podcast, because I'm going to make you aware of these things. It isn't just a simple configuration of planets that are going to eventually stop talking to each other, which they do, but this is a longer trigger and a longer experience of something that's uncomfortable. And I want to bring this to your attention because we don't want to look at things superficially. We want to understand that we are getting triggered and that things have to sort themselves out. We have to let things move through us. We have to work it out. We have to have conversations. None of this is very air sign oriented. It's all very mutable, water, fire, There's a lot of water and fire and some practicality with the Virgo moon, which can be wordy because it's ruled by Mercury. But there's not a lot of air in the sky. There's Jupiter and Gemini. And until Pluto goes into Aquarius, well, then we're always going to have a representative of air for the next 2 decades. But right now, there's a lot of water in the sky. And so there's feelings, and we have a lot of feelings right now. And so we may be feeling things and we can't put it into words so easily. And so if that is the case, maybe you need to just sit with yourself and allow yourself to feel the feelings. If you can verbally express them, terrific. If you can't, feel them, sense them, just be with them, okay? And maybe you're alone and you're feeling this. Maybe you're by yourself and there's a loneliness component to this because of Venus and Saturn. So be with yourself and allow these things to move through you. Now, on the other hand, Mars is talking to Neptune very nicely, and they are going to have a trine at 8:31 a.m. tomorrow morning at Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time for another week, Eastern Daylight Time. And Mars and Neptune are interesting dynamic, and I've talked about this before when they squared not so long ago when Mars was in Gemini, and they can be a little bit tricky. But this means that they're getting along, and they're getting along with Mercury, who is in another dynamic, which we'll get to. But Mars and Neptune are saying, okay, I'm going to take my energy and use it for the good, for the divine, for the altruistic reasons, and I'm going to try to see my way through this triggering dynamic in a peaceful way. That's because Mars and Neptune are speaking to each other nicely. But, there's some other things going on here that we need to be aware of. Everything's talking to everything right now, and there's not somebody that's sort of left out in the cold. Everybody's talking to each other. So and I'll get to Mars. I'll come back to Mars in a moment because we have a lot to say about Mars. So Mars is sweet with Neptune right now. They're getting along, but Mars is triggering this whole thing. And my teacher, Michael Luton, and this is appropriate for this time of year, used to say that Venus and Saturn are like the Wicked Witch of the West. And he would say that it's like that absence of love, that absence of feeling loved, and there is the quality of feeling unloved when it comes to Venus and Saturn. Now they're in a challenge. This is not a nice trine. This is not a nice sextile. They're not sweetly talking to one another. This is a hard aspect. So be kind to yourself and treat others with kindness right now. Have patience. It might be a little hard to have patience right now because of Mars, and we'll get more on Mars in a moment. But It may be hard to be patient with people and yourself right now. I implore you that it is extremely important to be patient and kind to yourself and others in this moment. Very deeply important. Now let's talk about Mercury for a moment. Mercury's in Scorpio. Mercury's been in Scorpio for a few weeks. Mercury is going to change signs this week. He's going to go into Sagittarius on Saturday the 2nd at 3:18 p.m. Eastern Time. But in the meantime, he's at 21 degrees of Scorpio. And if I apply the same deep look at Mercury that I have just applied to Mars and Venus and Saturn and the Moon, it means that Mercury is triggering the nodes. And Mercury is in a semi-square to the nodes, and he is making them a bit uncomfortable. So the nodes are always about the direction we're going in. It's about relationships, the one versus the other. It's about the axis, me and you and I, us. And Mercury is in the mix right now, triggering them. So our dynamics with others right now is extraordinarily important. And getting along is extraordinarily important. And not labeling people is extraordinarily important. Okay? Mercury is the planet of communication. He's in the very deep, intense sign of Scorpio. He can be a little sarcastic there. He can be very witty. He can really peg someone in a second there. He's very sensitive, very intuitive, profound, but he's triggering the nodes. So our words are very important right now because the North Node is in Aries, the South Node is in Libra. There is a good part of us that wants peace and serenity and does not want conflict. We have to balance these two components of our being right now. The desire to be independent and forthright and step forward as opposed to people-pleasing or, maybe clinging to others. But Mercury is asking us to watch our words and be very careful with our words because Mercury in Scorpio might say something that people don't like, okay? Especially when the nodes are being triggered. It could change the course of things. It could change the course of your relationship with someone. It could change the course of your dynamics in your friendships and relationships. So we got some hot stuff happening right now. And the Sun and Jupiter are triggering each other in this same dynamic. The Sun in Scorpio and Jupiter in Gemini. There's a lot to be said for this because there's, again, the Sun is in this semi-square aspect that is more of a unknown or considered minor, but it doesn't feel minor. And all of what I'm talking about is doing the same thing. And if you're not an astrology aficionado, you might be like, what is she saying? But let me explain it the way my teacher explained it many years ago. He said, you're lying on the side of the road, reaching for the ephemeris, which is the book of where the planets are. You're lying on the side of the road, reaching for the ephemeris, going, wait a minute, I'm not having an aspect. Wait a minute. And what that means is that these are sneaky and they're challenging. And we have to really watch our steps and our words right now. Okay? There's some not so cozy stuff happening and triggering things. And someone may say something that may trigger you. That does not mean that you should go right back at them. That's what these things are doing. They are triggers, and they are things that kind of come out of nowhere. They're a little bit of a surprise. It doesn't mean you're going to get ambushed, but there's this experience of these dynamics that is completely triggering in a maybe unconscious, sort of covert way. And we suddenly find ourselves dysregulated, uncomfortable. I need to get out of this conversation. I need to get away from this person. I need to get out of my head. And we need some good distractions and things. But I want you to know that these subtle things are happening, and you're not crazy if you feel this. And that if you feel challenged, you are correct. And this is going to go on for a couple days, and then it's going to mellow out. Okay? But we have to pay attention, and it's my job to inform you of these things. Now, remember, earlier this year when there was this nice Venus conjunction with the sun, and it was wonderful, and everybody's talking about how wonderful it was, and then I had people crying on my shoulder. Okay? This is an example of what was going on then. There was all across the internet, we were hearing, it's so wonderful, oh, this is beautiful. And I've got horror stories happening all around me, and people ready to give up, people desperately calling me, no. It's important to look at the subtle aspects, because if you feel under the weather, uncomfortable, or just disembodied in some way, that just came out. Disembodied. Yeah. If you feel like you're not connected to your body right now, it's normal. This is normal. Okay. So allow yourself a time to kind of work with this energy and recognize it. And you can if you name it half the time, it makes you feel so much better, right? Because you can sort of put your finger on what on earth is going on. But Venus-Saturn, in and of itself, now we could blame Venus-Saturn for the whole thing. We could just say, there's this nasty Venus-Saturn going on. Because Venus is the love principle, and she's in Sag, and she just wants to, have fun and be like a fun friend to go out and have a good time. And then Saturn's like, meh, no. Saturn's the wet blanket. Even in Pisces, yeah, wet blanket is right. the blanket that washed up on the shoreline, So Venus is really kind of getting pummeled right now between, Moon, Saturn, Mars things, okay? So be patient with yourself. Be patient with others. Treat yourself with kindness. Treat other people with kindness. Now, let's get to Mars. There is this dynamic that is happening that I talked about on Instagram the other day, and I want everyone to be very aware of, and that Mars is getting ready to oppose Pluto, and we're already feeling it. And even though Mars is triggering Venus and everybody, and then is also making nice with Neptune, Pluto and Mars are coming head to head with each other. They are in opposition, and they are in a place of challenge and a place of irritation. And this is very important. Okay, so listen up. We've got Mars opposing Pluto, 6:37 a.m. on Sunday, November 3rd. That is next Sunday. That's when we're going to be back here on the Golden Astrologer Podcast. But we've got Mars opposite Pluto. And this is something that only happens about once every 2 years, because Mars takes 2 years to go around the zodiac. So, a year ago or so, we had Mars conjunct Pluto, but Mars is opposing Pluto. So the conjunction's more of a blending of the energies. The opposition means it's an opposition, that you're feeling opposed, that someone is opposing you, something is challenging you, someone or something is giving you this opposition, which is complicated, right? It's Mars. It's the one that wants to initiate, that one that wants to stand forward, the warrior planet, the planet that wants to, strike the first blow. Opposite Pluto, which is the planet of transformation and things from the underworld. So all of a sudden, out of the underworld comes this punch in the face, and you're like, what the hell is this? What is this? And where did that come from? And I thought we were friends, and but this is an opposition. And Mars is 27, Pluto is 29. Pluto's not going anywhere. Pluto's going out. It's leaving. It's going to go ahead from 29 to 29, 45, 48, 50. It's going to leave in a few weeks. And so we've got this experience of Mars making this, this relationship to Pluto for the first of 3 times. And I've mentioned this before on this podcast a few weeks ago. But this is dynamically extremely important, because we are starting a story. We are having a story that has it's got 3 parts. There's 3 levels of it, but it's got 2 components, because This is the cardinal sign story, and then it's going to go into the fixed sign story. So Mars is in the cardinal sign of Cancer, opposing Pluto in the cardinal sign of Capricorn. And that means they're initiating something, they're starting something, they're initiating a story. And this is the very last time. I'm waving my pen in the air like I'm talking to somebody. I'm talking to all of you. Mars is going to oppose Pluto while Pluto is in Capricorn. This is it, guys. This is the final opposition from Mars. Now, we've been experiencing these oppositions for 16 years in this dynamic. Cancer is about the home, the family, the security, right? Security. And what makes us feel secure. Cancer is not an openly verbal sign. If you know Cancerians and you deal with Cancerians, or you are a Cancerian, things may be happening in your head, but you're not necessarily expressing them verbally. To get a Cancerian to tell you what's going on emotionally is a lot of work. Opposite Capricorn, which is the sign of governments, patriarchy, rules, and like the banking systems, as we saw earlier in this transit. But this is a lot to do with security, okay? And so those triggering feelings of insecurity and what security actually means to you and where security really comes from. It comes from within, right? So, and when you're secure within, your outer world is secure. So this is very, very important. This is the last time. So we're getting revved up all week. I mean, it's only 2 degrees away, but it's going to take a week to get there, right? Then I always give my warning about Mars. When Mars is involved with an outer planet like this, in an opposition, which is a challenge, no road rage, no going out in the car in a bad mood, be careful driving, be careful skateboarding, be careful rollerblading, be careful skiing, doing whatever it is that might be a little risky. Be careful. Watch your words. Don't get hot under the collar. And if you are hot under the collar, which I mentioned on Instagram the other day, if you're already feeling this, then what you've got to do is you've got to diffuse it. Go exercise, move your body. Figure out what's triggering you. Work with it. Okay? Do not throw darts at other people. And this is in opposition. It's easy to point a finger, blame the other person, blame some other party, blame a patriarchal government. That's the whole thing with Capricorn. Blame your mother. That's the whole thing with Cancer. Blame your family. I can't because my family brought me up this way. I can't because the government says I can't. I can't because blah, 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 the dynamic of Mars opposite Pluto. Mars rules Scorpio from ancient times. We're in Scorpio season. Pluto rules Scorpio from modern times. We're in Scorpio season. This is hot. Okay, this is hot. Later this week, Mercury, who's a busy bunny this week, Mercury is going to connect with Mars in a trine, a very nice trine, on Saturday the 2nd. So Mercury will trine Mars, 4:21 a.m., wee hours, Saturday the 2nd. It's also going to sextile Pluto the same day, later in the morning, 11:03 a.m. This is all Eastern Daylight Time. And then it's going to go into Sagittarius, 3:18 p.m., as I mentioned earlier. But it's going to make those moments, those are nice, soft aspects. And with Mars not moving very quickly, Mars is going to get the trine from Mercury, as Mercury also will trine Neptune on Halloween, which is this week, Thursday the 31st. So Mercury's going to trine Mars and Neptune, and there's going to be this grand water trine between Mercury, Mars, and Neptune this week. And this is good for sorting out your thoughts, coming to terms with your thoughts, allowing yourself to really understand what's happening for you. Like maybe you can make a mental, thoughtful connection to what's happening for you emotionally, especially with Mars and Pluto opposing each other. So I think that Mercury and Neptune are going to help smooth this over, and so is Uranus for that matter, because there's a lot of things in late parts of the sign, that later in the 20s, the late 20s of the signs. Neptune's 27 Pisces. Uranus is 26 Taurus. Pluto's 29 Capricorn. Mars right now is 27 Cancer. Mercury's 21 Scorpio. So they're later. So we're hoping that this nice grand water trine smooths over this opposition with Pluto, and that you come to some sort of agreement before you hit someone with your fist, okay, or with your words. Do be careful during this. It's really important. So we've got a hot week coming up. We've got a hot week right now it's hot because of all of what I just described, things getting triggered, subtly triggered in ways that you don't obviously see. And since they are not obvious things, you're going to feel them subtly in your energy field. Like, what is this? Why am I so uncomfortable? That's what we're getting now. Things are going to be a little more obvious toward the end of the week and the beginning of next week. Now, after Mars makes the opposition to Pluto, because it's so late in Cancer and Pluto's so late in Capricorn, Mars is going to do this at 6:37 a.m. Sunday morning Eastern Time, which will then no longer be daylight savings time. And then it's going to hop into Leo that night, 11:10 p.m., which is, the next time we see each other. Well, the next time you hear me on this podcast, Mars will be finishing its experience in Cancer for the moment, and then hop on into Leo, where it's going to stay for 2 months, and then eventually go back into Cancer. Now, remember, I talked about Mars going retrograde, so that happens on December 6th. So it's going to take from next Sunday, November 3rd, to December 6th, or even earlier than that, to just go 6 degrees, which means Mars is already slowing down and getting ready for this retrograde. And so we have a lot to process over these months, okay? Lots to process. And remember what I said last week, if you need to do something, launch something, do it now. Do it now. Get there now, okay? So much going on. I haven't even discussed the new moon that is happening on Friday the 1st, which is All Saints Day. It is at 9 degrees of Scorpio. So that, again, we're still in water signs. We still have a lot of water energy happening. Right now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 planets in water. That's Sun and Mercury in Scorpio, Mars in Cancer, and Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. So there's a lot about feelings. Now, water signs, like I mentioned, do not necessarily verbally express what's going on, and there is not a lot of air in the sky. So, don't expect that people are going to know how you feel. Don't expect that, well, how come you don't know that I'd feel like this? Don't do that. That's not going to go over very well, because it's not going to give us any real leverage in our dialogue with someone. Like, how come you're expecting people to feel things and know things about you that they shouldn't know? They're not going to know. So, okay, so this is a very highly charged week. In the middle of the week, Mercury is going to oppose Uranus on Wednesday the 30th. So again, watch your words. Don't be rash. Don't say something you're going to want to take back and regret later. Please be careful with your words. And do be very thoughtful about how you approach people, how you are speaking to people. And you might say things like very roughly or abruptly. That's Uranus. So much is in water. I was going to say everything, but not everything. So much is in water that we have to mind everyone's sensitivity, and everyone is sensitive right now. So let's use some awareness and consciousness in our dealings with others, okay? The other thing that's happening is next Sunday is a big day. So we've got that, that Mars opposite Pluto, Mars changing signs, and then we've got Venus opposite Jupiter, which is woohoo! That's fun, right? But Jupiter is in Gemini, and it really belongs in Sag, but Venus is in Sag, so they are talking to one another. It's still very good. It's still Jupiter. It's not bad or anything. It's just, it can be a little bit of overindulgence. And yes, by the way, there could be overindulgence. People celebrating Halloween parties late. Overindulgence can lead to harsh words or fist fights, right? So let's just watch that Sunday, okay? Stay home, watch football, go do some gardening, do something, go for a nice walk. Watch that. Venus is also going to trine Chiron, 11:22 a.m. So this is all, it's going to be within an hour of each other. Venus will oppose Jupiter, and Venus will trine Chiron, and that's all in the morning Eastern time. And so we have a lot of changes and shifts this week. We have Mercury changing signs. We have Mars changing signs. We have Venus and Saturn in a challenge. We have Mars and Pluto in a challenge. So, the best advice I can give you is to take one moment at a time and not allow yourself to get carried away and swept up in your feelings. Remember, this is a week of feelings, lots of water, feelings. And as we move through this week, we have to just use our awareness and consciousness as best as we can to not hurt yourself, to not hurt other people, to make sure that you are grounded and focused. And, that's one of the things you like to use Saturn for, being committed and grounded and focused and in good, very structured things, okay? If all else fails, go to work. Do your work, right? Sit down, focus on your work, and just keep your head down and keep your thoughts clean and not in a challenging way, okay? And listen to your heart. Listen to your heart in all of this, because we are dealing with a lot of water, and we are dealing with, feelings and sensitivities, and what does your heart tell you? And as Joe Dispenza always says, what would love do? Okay, so if you are not feeling loved, or you don't feel the love right now because of Venus, Saturn, and the moon in there in the mix, and Mars triggering all of it, if you don't feel loved, what would make you feel loved right now? Would it be a hug from someone? Would it be some self-care, self-nurturing? Would it be something that you really need from yourself first, and then watch others respond, watch the world respond when you have identified what would be loving to self right now? And when you can love yourself, then you can love others. Don't have high expectations of people this week. Don't make assumptions about how people are going to be. Talk it out. Be conscious. Stay with your instincts, your intuitions. Listen to yourself. Listen to your heart. Listen to your intuition. I want all of us to come out of this in a positive way, okay? So I do want to mention again that in my New Vision system, we have introduced a mini scan. And if you would like a mini scan, it will give you the top 10 health recommendations for you based on your birth date, your name, and your birth city. We don't need birth time for that. You can go to our website, newvisionusa.com. That's spelled nuvisionusa.com. And that will lead you to the mini scan. You'll see it on the landing page and then also up in the main navigation. It's $35, and you can, it won't necessarily be me doing the scan, but it could be me or one of the other practitioners that would send you this information, and there'll be additional information along with it, potentially, depending on what comes up on your scan. So it's a good launching point if you are interested in our New Vision system and you don't know much about it, or if you're interested in getting some basic information about your health. It might say something like, you should use peppermint essential oil, or perhaps you should do a cleanse for parasites, or you should take more vitamin C. It's suggestions, it's helpful recommendations, it's not a diagnosis, but I invite you to have a look at that, okay? newvisionusa.com, and go to Miniscan, and you'll see it there. In the meantime, if you need me and my offerings during this complicated moment, and we are in a complicated time, because remember, we're on our way now. By the time I see you next, it will be November, and we'll be in the last 2 months of the year, looking towards Pluto moving into Aquarius on November 19th. So this is soon. And I invite you to contact me at my website, thegoldenastrologer.com. Click book online. You will be able to book me for an astrology session, a Reiki session, a bunch of Reiki sessions, or you could join me in expansion mentoring, which is a great thing to do, especially as we are going to be going into this new paradigm. And in expansion mentoring, we can work for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and all of this is really positive for, clearing out the old and welcoming in the new and reaching your goals and letting me work with you to reach your goals. I thank you for listening. I hope you have a beautiful week. I hope you heed my advice. And if you need to reach out, I'm also on Instagram, the Golden Astrologer. You can reach me there as well. So I look forward to hearing from all of you and have a beautiful week. Thanks for listening.